Evolution tells us how it was possible for the enormous diversity of life to develop. It shows us how primitive protozoa could become the millions of different species that we see today. Evolution, then, is the answer to the question that we have all asked on seeing a dachshund and a Great Dane together. How is it possible for ancestors to have descendants that look so very different to them? In answering this question, we want to focus on animals, excluding other forms of life such as fungi and plants. The first question to ask is therefore, how can one animal develop into a whole new species of animal? But just a quick question. What exactly is a species? A species is a community of animals that is capable of producing offspring with one another, with those offspring also being capable of reproducing in turn. To understand this answer better, we need to take a closer look at the following points. The uniqueness of living creatures guaranteed through the excess production of offspring and heredity, and, as a second key point, selection. Let's begin with uniqueness. Every creature that exists is unique, and this is essential for evolution. The members of a species may strongly resemble each other in appearance, however, they all have slightly different traits and characteristics. They may be a bit bigger, fatter, stronger, or bolder than their fellow animals. So what is the reason for these differences? Let's take a closer look at a creature. Every creature is made up of cells. These cells...
Okay, what's the name of this thing? Nucleus. What's inside the nucleus? Nucleus is in there, DNA is in there, and it's packed in tiny little, what are those little things called? Chromosomes, not ribosomes. Chromosomes, how many do we have? 46.
Let's have a nucleus. The nucleus contains the chromosomes, and the chromosomes hold the DNA. DNA consists of different genes.
Okay, and these little three-letter things, right? These codons, this could be an A, or it could be a
D,
G, or a C, or a T. Good.
And it's these genes that are life's information carriers. They contain instructions and orders for the cells and determine the characteristics and traits that living creatures have. And it's precisely this DNA that is unique to every creature. It's slightly different from individual to individual, which is why each has slightly different characteristics. But how is the enormous range of DNA created? One key factor is the excess production of offspring. In nature, we can observe that creatures generally produce far more offspring than is necessary.
Okay, what's going to happen to some of these babies? Yeah, it's a bummer.
Necessary for the survival of their species, with many offspring dying an early death as a result. Often there are even more offspring than the environment in which they live is able to support. This is one factor in increasing diversity within a species. The more offspring that are produced, the more little differences occur.
Okay.
And this is...
We're all, every single one of us, even though our DNA is like 99.9% the same, like all of us in here. Okay, that 0.1% is huge. Okay, we each have these small differences that are important.
Is what nature wants, as many little differences as possible. The second major cause of the uniqueness of individuals occurs in heredity itself. By the way, heredity means the passing on of DNA to offspring. Two very interesting factors come into play in this process: recombination and mutation. Recombination is the random mix.
Okay, now, quick little question. Can anyone tell me, ooh, this is a tough one. If you could do it, it's awesome. If not, that's fine. But when we switch this blue and red together, that wasn't mitosis. What was that? Meiosis, yes. Okay, now listen. Okay, what's it called? We threw a box around in this.
Oh,
What was that?
what? Oh,
Okay, what happened? What was that called? I jokingly said it was like John Edwards was talking to dead people.
Well, we did like get the devil's number, so.
Yeah. What was it? Yeah. Right. What was that called though?
No idea.
Crossing over. And that was in what phase of meiosis?
2.
Prophase 1. Yeah. Prophase.
Yeah.
Mixing of the DNA of two creatures. When two creatures fall in love and mate, they recombine their genes
I gotta
twice.
mute this in a second.
The first time they do this separately, when they
Okay.
generate the
What about the captain?
All right.
Hey, don't say anything.
All right. So these remember these are cartoons. Okay. Like, oh God, this is gonna get hot. All right. So so this right here, how many chromosomes are in these sperm? Nope. 23. How many in the eggs? What's 23 plus 23? 46, right?
gametes, that is, sperm and egg cells.
Please, come on. Is there like a
The gametes take half of the genes and shuffle them.
Oh God.
The second recombination occurs when a male inseminates a female. The parents each provide 50% of their DNA. In other words, 50% of their unique traits and
All right,
characteristics.
listen.
These are then recombined or mixed, and the result is new
I
offspring.
didn't send this to you for e-learning lesson.
These offspring have a random mix of the DNA, and therefore the traits and characteristics of their parents. This increases the diversity and differences within a species even further. But mutations are also important for evolution.
Okay, now listen. Whenever I hear mutations, I think like X-Men, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, that kind of stuff, right? Like something that's gonna like end up giving you superpowers. Every single one of you in here is a mutant. Every single one of you in this room has a mutation, okay? And that's why you're here. Like you're not, look, this is not a process of like, one of those things you're like, oh gosh, I hope I don't die. You know, you have all survived. You're survivors. You're the result of someone surviving before you. Okay. Now, if you were a baby and you died, which happens all the time, okay, you're not a survivor, but for some reason you survived. Okay. And it wasn't just by chance. Okay. So just remember that. But now your mutations are important for the future.
Mutations are random changes in DNA. These can also be described as copying errors within the DNA, triggered by toxins or other chemical substances or by radiation. A mutation exists when a part of the DNA is altered. These changes are often negative and may result in illnesses such as cancer. However, they may also have neutral or positive effects, such as the blue eye color in humans, which is one such random mutation. In all cases, a mutation has to affect a gamete, that is a sperm or egg cell, because only the DNA in the gametes is passed on to the offspring. This is also the reason why we protect our sexual organs during X-rays, whilst other parts of the body are not at risk. In summary then, in the heredity process, creatures pass on their characteristics to their offspring in the form of DNA. Recombination and mutation change the DNA so that each child looks different to its siblings and receives a random mix of the characteristics of its parents. There's a key word here: random. All of these processes are based on chance. Random recombination and mutations result in individuals with random mixes of traits and characteristics, which in turn mix these randomly and pass them on. But how can so much be down to chance when all living creatures are so perfectly adapted to their environment? For example, the stick insect, the hummingbird, and the frogfish. The answer is provided by the second key point, selection. Each individual is subjected to a process of natural selection. As we have learned, each individual is somewhat different to its fellows, and there is extensive variation within a species. Environmental influences have an effect on living creatures. These so-called selection factors include predators, parasites, animals of the same species, toxins, changes in habitat, or the climate. Selection is a process that each individual is subjected to. Every creature has a unique mix of traits and characteristics. This mix helps them to survive in their environment, or not, as the case may be.
That's tough.
Anyone with an unsuitable mix will be selected from the environment.
Oh, no. It's gonna take the win.
Those with the right mix survive and can pass on their enhanced traits and characteristics.
Now you gotta make another one.
This is why diversity is so important.
Don't skip.
This is why creatures make so much effort to produce offspring that are as different as possible. They increase the likelihood that at least one of their offspring passes nature's selection process. They maximize their chances of survival. A good example of this can be seen in a group of finches living.
All right, now this is kind of like the second part, but remember Darwin went to the Galapagos Islands off the coast of Quito, Ecuador, and these finches blew there from a storm. He's going to say that in a second. Okay, but that was something that like a lot of people didn't know for a long time. Think about like how many times we get like an invasive species. These are technically, they were invasive, right? They were non-native species that came in and like took over. Okay, think about the pythons in Florida, right? They were there because either A, somebody let a python go, okay, because it got too big, they couldn't handle anymore. Some also believe that some were blown out of pet stores during Hurricane Andrew, like no joke. Okay, that's one theory too. Okay, but they take over, right? I don't see raccoons or marsh rabbits in the Everglades anymore because the pythons have eaten them all. Like no joke. From 1998, the first time I ever went to the Everglades, they used to warn you, like, do not leave any food in your tent. Raccoons will get them. I used to like practically step on these cute little marsh rabbits. They're actually pretty big. I haven't seen one for 20 years. Okay. So these blew in there. And once something gets there, remember like a python, no natural predator, they take over, right? That's what these finches did. But then what happened next was really cool.
On a remote island. They are some of the most famous animals in the world of science and are known as Darwin finches after their discoverer, Charles Darwin. And this is the story of those finches. A few hundred years ago, a small group of finches was blown onto the Galapagos Islands in the middle of the Pacific, probably by a big storm. The finches found themselves in an environment that was completely new to them, a real finch paradise, an abundance of food, and no predators. They reproduced rapidly and numerously. The islands were soon heaving with finches. This meant that food supplies became increasingly scarce. The finch paradise was threatened with famine, and finch friends became competitors. This is when selection intervened. Their individuality and small differences, in this case their slightly different beaks, meant that some of the birds were able to avoid competing with their fellow finches. The beaks of some of the finches were more suitable for digging for worms. Other finches were able to use their beaks better for cracking seeds. The finches consequently sought out ecological niches. In these niches, they were safe from excessive competition.
Remember, habitat's where you live. So these are all the Galapagos Islands. And niche is the role. Okay, so our habitat is North Manchester. Your niche is you're a student.
They soon began to mate primarily with other finches that used the same niche. Over the course of many generations, these characteristics were enhanced, enabling the finches to exploit their niches successfully. The differences between the worm diggers and the seed crackers became so large that they were no longer able to mate with one another. Different species emerged as a result. Today, there are 14 different species of finch living on the Galapagos Islands, all of which are descended from the same group of stranded finches. This is how new species are created by evolution, through the interaction of unique individuals, the excess production of offspring, recombination and mutation in heredity, and finally, through selection. Why is this so important? It tells us where the variety of life comes from and why living creatures are so perfectly adapted to their habitats. But it also affects us personally. Every person is the result of 3.5 billion years of evolution. And that includes you. Your ancestors fought and adapted in order to survive. This survival was an extremely uncertain thing. If we consider the fact that 99% of all the species that have ever lived are extinct, then you can consider yourself part of a success story. The dinosaurs have disappeared, but you are alive, watching this video.
Which is pretty cool. Okay, so whenever we talk about evolution, people always say to me, they're like, but evolution is just a theory. And like, I never knew really quite how to think about that, right? Because when you hear the word evolution, you do hear evolutionary theory, right? Then I came across this quote, and I really, man, it stuck with me, and I want to say it to you. Okay, so in science, something can be both a theory and a fact. And a man by the name of a scientist by the name of Stephen Jay Gould said this: facts and theories are different things, not rungs on a hierarchy of increasing certainty. Facts are the world's data. Theories are structures of ideas that explain and interpret facts. Okay, so people are always like, well, it's just a theory. Okay, I can't learn this stuff. It's just a theory. It's not real. If you take anatomy and physiology, you'll learn something called the sliding filament theory. It's the theory about how our muscles move. So basically, if I want to take you to the gun show, okay, right? Okay, ooh, okay, it's because those muscles are in between two fixed points. Okay, we call those sarcomeres, and those sarcomeres shorten. Okay, like this. That's because two fibers. Okay, we actually call them myofilaments, myosin and actin, go over each other like this to shrink that thing called a sarcomere. It's much more detailed than that, but it's called the sliding filament theory. No one right now is like, man, we got to disprove that. Okay, maybe someday it'll be a real thing. We know, we've seen it with microscopes. This is how scientists have described and determined it. The theory is called sliding filament theory. The facts are we've got myosin, we got actin, we got these troponin and these calcium molecules that come in and make it happen. Okay, we might find some new stuff and add to that theory as we do with evolution. Okay, but it's not going to become a fact. Okay, evolution is supported by facts. The theory is the explanation. Y'all with me on this? Y'all with me on this? Okay, thanks. All right, open up your Chromebooks. Let's go to classroom. We're gonna open up a thing that says PBS Evolution Lab. PBS Evolution Lab.
You said it's in class.
It's in classroom, right? It's on the stream. I'll put her on the stream.
No,
This is Asia's mom, Erica. She asked me if I could, Asia, if I could put a picture, if she could put a picture of her mom on my board. I said, sure.
I put a picture of someone on your board.
I don't know. It depends. Your mom?
No. Figure out and give me a check. I need to know.
All right.
I click yes or change.
Okay, so listen, hold real quick. When you get onto this thing, you're going to click this sign in with Google. I don't know if it'll let me because I've already been there earlier today. If I click this, okay, I click play game. Yeah. PBS Fort Wayne is. Okay, see, it automatically takes me to this. I want you to click sign in with Google. Okay, hit play game and then sign in with Google. Play game.
Let me guess.
Sign in with Google.
Play the game.
Click sign in with Google.
Google.
This stuff. I make it.
You been here before? What?
Yes. This sounds right.
I didn't mean to click crazy.
Gotta click play game first, and then sign in with Google, and then this will take me here. Here we go.
Sammy, chill.
I didn't want anybody to get
Gotta
upset
get past first base.
at the cartoon sense. Okay, so what we got here is in the video, you saw those phylogenetic trees, and I think they're really, really cool. I have this poster of the history of existing birds. This diagram was done by a 19-year-old woman whose mom started this business called Pharaoh Graphics. And this girl was really interested in birds, so she created this phylogenetic tree, which is really cool. I met her and her family at a conference in Chicago, and I was like, man, I'm definitely buying your poster there. Okay, but this is a way to look at relationships of individuals. Okay, so we're going to click on where it says training trees. Okay, and don't do anything yet. Okay, I'm going to show you this quick video to explain how we're going to do
Let's
this.
talk tree basics.
Right.
An evolutionary phylogenetic tree is a depiction of how different species are related to each other.
We'll start with just one branch, which represents a single species, like cushion sea stars or human beings. The top of that branch contains all the individual organisms of that species, so all people or all cushion sea stars. If we travel along a branch back in time,
You come to common ancestors of species when two branches come together.
now let's roll time forward instead. This split point represents the evolutionary moment when a common ancestor species diverged into two distinct species, a process called speciation. As time goes on, you get more splitting, more species, and more biodiversity, until you get a tree that looks something like this.
It's a hierarchical arrangement of how those organisms originated and who they are more closely related to.
A tree isn't a literal timeline, but it does show the passing of time.
More ancient branches occur deeper in the tree, and more recent splits occur closer to the tips.
For each puzzle in this lab, you'll be organizing a collection of species into a tree. Start by using the magnifying glass to learn about the organisms. Explore the species screens and the comparison screen to track down the characteristics or traits that different groups of species have in common. Now, not all traits are useful for analyzing evolutionary relationships, but not to worry, we've made sure to give you mostly informative ones. After you've gathered the information you need, build your tree by dragging species icons and then traits into the center of the screen. In general, the more closely related the species, the more traits they share. Deeper branch points connect species that are more distantly related and have fewer traits in common. When you position a trait, that location on the tree corresponds to the common ancestor where that trait first arose. Earn up to 2 leaves in every puzzle, one for completing the tree and one for getting the quiz question right. The more leaves you get, the more complex you can make your fractal tree, which tracks your progress through the lab. After you finish each puzzle, you'll unlock the next one or open up a whole new mission, and you'll discover something about the living world pulsing all around you.
All right, so here's what I want you to do. Click on red, green, and gecko. Okay, so we're gonna do this one kind of together here. Okay, so and it's got some little hints here for you. Okay, we've got a gecko and we've got a palm tree. Two very different things, right? Gecko, an animal, palm tree, a plant. So we're going to drag both these to the center, just like this. Okay, and now we're going to drag the shared trait onto the tree. So we should do this right here, and it lights up. You can see that lighting up right there. Boom, just like that. Okay, right? So everybody's computer should look like this at this point. Does anyone have any questions?
Can you zoom in on that page like you have the little button that'll mark it?
Sure, I think. Nope, that won't do it. Okay, so just follow the directions. So you drag the 2 things into the middle, right? Okay, so no, you gotta drag both, but yep, there you go. And then you gotta drag that blue thing right down to the bottom.
Basically.
Okay, you get it?
Great
Okay.
job.
Oh, some of you are jumping ahead, which is fine by me. Okay, so we successfully built our first tree. Both gecko and the palm tree have cells with nuclei, so there is something in common. They're not prokaryotic, which means the organelles aren't just floating around. Okay, so here we go. Next, click next. And the magnifying glass tells us more information. Okay, so here's this fly agaric. Okay, it's a fungi. Okay, so we can look at this and I can click on, okay, what it is. It tells me a little bit more about it. It has cells with nuclei. It's heterotrophic. Although people native to Siberia use this visually striking fungus as a hallucinogen. Yeah, baby. Yeah, I want one, baby, yeah. Okay, many fungi absorb carbon by breaking down dead and decaying organisms. Flying agaric mushrooms grow in close associations with living plant roots, providing nutrients in exchange for carbon. Okay, so what do you think? Is it going to go more with the tree, or is it, yeah? Okay, all right. So we can go over this way, like that. Oh, so that doesn't seem to work. Okay, so should I put it over here? And should I say that maybe that this is heterotrophic? Does that work? Boom, it tells me that it does, and then I could go over here and say that this is photosynthetic. Okay, so remember, heterotroph means that we get its food from another source. Photosynthetic means I'm getting my food from the sun, right? So now you've completed the first puzzle. Answer the question: is an animal or plant more closely related to a fungus? The animal, right? Isn't that weird? Maybe you wouldn't think that at all. Okay, so then we're going to click next, and we will stop right there. Okay, we will try another one tomorrow. I will stop.
Keep going, officer.